Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Deller Coltman, joined by Elliot and Braden. As always, welcome back. It is Mother's Day, so much love to all the mothers out there, to our mothers, obviously, who I think listen to this show. So
religiously.
Well, at least one of them does. I don't know. Elliot's kind of. Maybe she'll listen to this one, Elliot, if we give her a little love. So happy Mother's Day. Lots to talk about. Oilers had a tough night, but overall the playoffs have certainly been exciting. We're going to talk about that and then just sort of deep dive into what else is going on in the sports world. Let's get to it. Here's topic one. All right, so we're going to start with the Oilers, as obviously all three of us are Oiler fans. This feels a lot different than last year. It feels nice to be in a series where you have, the Oilers actually being able to win some games. They lost game one, obviously, in a tight one after a difficult sort of third period there, predominantly based on a poor choice of pass by Mike Smith, something we have seen many times in his career. However, on aggregate, I think he makes a lot better choices than poor ones. But when the poor ones happen like that, they burn you. I do remember, Braden, you earlier in the year were quite frustrated with both he and Mikko Koskinen for costing the Oilers games based on some poor stick handling. But the Oilers were able to bounce back in game two with a big win, again, on the back of Mike Smith. And then they went into LA, took the long way into LA, flew to Vancouver, then drove to Seattle, then got on a plane and flew to LA to avoid testing, because apparently you still have to test to fly into the United States, but you don't have to test to drive into the United States. So to avoid testing and the risk of maybe losing a player here or there, pretty much every Canadian team, I believe, did something.
Don't they have to
similar.
Test those? Does the as NHL players they have to
that's
test
no
anyway?
longer. No, that's no longer.
Oh, that's how.
Well, after Omicron, they basically did away with that. Anyway,
well, how do they find out somebody's in COVID protocol?
They don't. Have you heard of anyone in COVID protocol?
Yeah, there's a guy right now. That just.
I guess he'd have to.
Charlie McAvoy.
He'd have to be ill enough to get tested, but
so if
he'd have to have symptoms. Yeah. Let me finish my story, Braden. They win game one in LA, so that's game three in a decisive. I think they scored 8 goals, and then obviously Sunday night, Jonathan Quick came back. So we've seen Mike Smith bounce back after a difficult loss. Much more embarrassing, including being pulled for Jonathan Quick, but he is a wily old veteran. He comes out, plays very well. The LA got back to playing their style of game, shutting the Oilers down in the neutral zone, making it difficult for them to play. Very aggressive penalty kill. And the game got a little bit out of hand for the Oilers late. It devolved in such a way that they just weren't able to get their game back. So they find themselves now in a best of 3 here to finish this out. We will at least go 6. They'll go to Edmonton for 5 and then back to LA for 6. And if we need 7, we'll get there. We talked a week ago about what we expected. Elliot, you're a week into this as an Oilers fan. How you feeling?
Well, it's difficult not to let the recency bias sort of settle in after a tough game tonight. But if you talked to me before this game, and I had felt Edmonton had been the better teams through games 1, 2, and 3. Much more significantly so, obviously, in games 2 and 3. But even in game 1, you could tell that they were the better hockey team. They have more skill. They have a deeper lineup. Where they struggle, or they're much better on the special teams. Where they struggled, or maybe it favors more LA is probably a net. But otherwise, Edmonton's the better team in this series, and they're the higher ranked team, and they have the home ice advantage. And I do feel that. But I just don't think there's an easy out in the NHL anymore. I mean, maybe Colorado and Nashville, we'll talk about other series later, but it's good. You're going to go at least 6 games in most of these series. Teams are just too close. And it's, one bad break one way or another can really swing a series. And I think that's what we've seen tonight. I think LA needed to make significant wholesale adjustments as a team to sort of counter what the Oilers were doing. They made them, and good on them. Good on Todd McClellan and the coaching staff and the players for executing. And now we'll see. Now the ball's in Jay Woodcroft's court, and the Oilers are going to have to respond to those changes themselves. But very interesting back and forth. I think the Oilers probably should be up 3-1 in this series. They're not. It's 2-2. But I think they're the better team.
It's interesting you bring up goaltending and suggest that LA's been better when you consider even tonight, mean, it's only 3 goals against Mike Smith. The fourth one obviously is an empty netter. And the third goal we can talk about if you want to. It's definitely one of those interesting plays that we've occasionally seen in the playoffs where there's, it goes to review and the Oilers are not unfamiliar with those situations. I'm thinking of Getzlav with his arm buried inside Cam Talbot's pads.
I try not to think about Getzlav.
Regardless, Mike Smith faced over 45 shots, and when you're only letting 3 goals in and you're the goaltender being peppered for 40 shots, you can't say that Mike Smith didn't do his job tonight to keep the Oilers in a game that they simply couldn't score in. And again, when you flip it around and suggest, I think they put something like, was it 13 or 14 points up against the LA Kings up to that point in the series before Sunday night's game. I mean, I don't know. Is LA goaltending really that much better? I think Mike Smith probably actually has the edge over the entire series. Again, he makes one mistake, but he was equal to Jonathan Quick to that point in game 1. So I don't know if I agree with that. Braden, you and I and Elliot all discussed goaltending coming into the series. I think you were an advocate that Mike Smith had played well enough to be the starter to start the series. He's certainly done enough to stay the starter throughout this series so far. But for you, how's the goaltending fared in terms of, is that the difference, I guess? Did you feel like that's where Elliot is, that's sort of maybe LA's advantage?
It's fascinating. Well, first and foremost, thrilled that Mike Smith had the bounce back that he had. Not so thrilled that Quick had the bounce back he had. I was surprised to see Quick in this game to start, but it seemed like Todd McLellan after the last game knew right away that this was just a bit of an anomaly and they were going to come back strong the next game, pick up their play. The goaltending definitely. I mean, Mike Smith. He didn't even really let those. I mean, the goals went past them, but those, Duncan Keith tipped the second goal. The first goal was just a bad turnover. He kept the Oilers in this game 3 though. This could have for sure been a blowout. LA came on strong, peppered with
game 4.
Game 4, that's right. Complete fire. It could have been higher scoring. The Oilers had some really good chances, but it just wasn't, it wasn't their game. They're going to come back better next game. I'm amazed with how many games in the NHL playoffs so far have been such high scoring, like all but for Calgary and Dallas. It seems like the scoring has been off the charts.
Yeah, we'll get to the rest of the NHL in a second. I want to stay with the Oilers for one more moment here, Elliot. When you look now forward to, again, as they say, it's a 3-game series. The first to win 2 wins it. Edmonton gets to go home. They've had, pretty good success at home over the last little bit of the season, and obviously losing game 1. But as you mentioned, certainly playing their game at home. Do you think that this kind of win for LA puts them back in the driver's seat? Does it give them the kind of momentum that they can ride forward? Or does this kind of, are we seeing like a cycle here where, LA bouncing back from a tough loss? This is an opportunity now for the Oilers to do the same thing at home. Who do you think responds to this result in game 5 more effectively?
Well, you'd have to think the Oilers are going to have the advantage. They're going to be mad about what happened last game. There's 17 game misconducts to end the game today. There's clearly some bad blood developing towards the team. And when you're in that kind of a state and the team that you're playing against well, I think you are advantaged at home. And with the crowd, we've seen that place can go rocking. And I think tonight there was lots of, the crowd certainly helped LA. And I think that's good too. But what Edmonton's done here is they've wrestled back home ice advantage and need to capitalize on that and make that a thing. I don't want to belabor the point about goalies, but I think if you're going to ask me what happens in the next 3 games, a lot's going to be dependent on Jonathan Quick. Because I think on the whole of the series, the Edmonton Oilers have had not maybe more opportunity shots or more opportunities per se, but certainly higher quality opportunities. The save tonight against Yamamoto was a good example of that. That game, that goal goes in. It's a 2-1 game. You've got a period and a half still left to go.
That's a tough
context.
How about Zach Cassian's breakaway? I mean, that's the lead right off the start of the game.
Yeah, and Evander Kane's one-timer that was, there was
definitely
examples there. The Oilers capitalized in games 2 and games 3, and they won 6-0 and 8-2. So what I think is the difference here, the only thing The only thing that gives me concern is just the quality of play of Jonathan Quick. And that's going to be tough. If the Oilers go into game 5 and they get back into that grinding role, and they, you're only going to score with dirty ones now in the crease.
That's right.
Supermaning the puck into the net apparently is allowed now. So, you're going to have to do some of that deflections. Jonathan Quick is an all-star goalie and has been doing this a long time. And tonight was a good
two-time Stanley Cup champ.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm thinking about. That's the difference maker. Is Jonathan Quick able to play to that insane standard that we know he can? And if not, I think, you'd have to feel pretty good betting on the Oilers right now.
One other difference maker for me, though, is Philip Danault right now. It's really like what they've been able to do with him. You can start to see the clock ticking, his IQ going of where McDavid's going to be, where those passes are coming from a little bit more. They're getting their sticks into the slot, getting that open ice kind of shut down. You saw it in this game. Like, I think Danault is one of those guys that's going to make it really difficult here still moving forward.
Can I jump in on that? I feel like in every playoff series that we've seen up until this point that's involved Connor McDavid, the opposition has sort of stapled someone to Connor McDavid. Think back to like Kessler in the Anaheim series. It doesn't seem like LA's doing that. Does that surprise you? Like, if I'm just like, I felt like, oh yeah, who's gonna be? They're playing them differently, it feels.
It's hard to say because in 2 games they were completely incapable of controlling them. I mean, if you look at game 3, where I believe he had 5 points and not a single goal, they're all assists because he's setting up guys who, again, whether he's drawing an extra man to him on an odd rush or he's putting himself in a position to be able to make those plays. I mean, I think one of Draisaitl's goals on the power play, they had all come over to McDavid's side. And that, we've seen that throughout the season. Leon's able to get those one-timers off because he's left alone over there. That's the advantage of having 2 sort of, thoroughbred, genuine scorers out there that some teams have to make decisions. So I think I would agree with your observation that they haven't necessarily plastered someone to him the way we've seen in the past. I don't know if LA has that guy, but I would say I also agree with Braden that Philip Danault on occasion has had really good opportunities to shut him down. We saw that in this game. I think it's less about one guy, and I think it's more just their system is making it difficult for the kind of game the Oilers want to play when LA plays their system well. And, I think that's what Todd McClellan's frustration was at the end of game 3, when he basically came out for about a minute and a half of a press conference and didn't ask her a single question, basically said none of us were good enough. We didn't play our game. We got trapped playing their game. What he means by that is that LA has found success against the Oilers and other teams throughout this year, teams that are more skilled, let's say, than them offensively, because they clog up the neutral zone. They make it very difficult for teams to gain entry. They're good at chasing down pucks in their own zone in the corner. They did something today I've never seen that I looked at and I went, how is every team not doing this on the penalty kill? Occasionally on a penalty kill, you get a chance to kind of forecheck and you see those guys try to sort of take a puck deep into the offensive zone and they just try to kill clock. And often they'll pin it against the boards and maybe, they'll get roughed up and then they turn it over. But LA was on a penalty kill. I think this is in the second or third period. And I believe it was Philip Danault had the puck deep in the Oilers zone. He didn't take a shot, didn't get an angle to a shot. He was angled out to the corner, but instead of sort of trying to turn and kill clock, he literally cleared the zone for the Oilers. He rimmed it around the boards all the way back to LA's zone as if he was icing the puck had he been an Oiler, and it went right back to his own defenseman, and they maintained possession on the penalty kill. And I thought to myself, like, this is brilliant. I've never seen it. I've just never seen it done that way, where literally a guy rimmed the puck out of the zone all the way back to his own end because he was just, but that's the kind of.
But he's a very similar player to a Zach Hyman on the penalty kill. It's one of those guys you watch. It's like he's got a string on a puck on a string when he's trying to defend, right? And the PK is, and it's also one of those guys where I mean, I don't know if you guys are the same, but every time Zach Hyman has the puck, I'm like, good job. Yes. Yes. Do that.
Yeah,
You're doing, but he does it every single play. Yeah. And it's, and I think it's the same for the Kings with Danault.
Yeah. And I think that's what the Oilers now need to turn their attention back to is they need more guys than just Hyman creating chances from nothing, because obviously they're not going to get a lot of chances gifted to them. they have to capitalize on the ones they get, and we didn't see that on Sunday night. But if the Oilers can have, we've seen Ryan McLeod do this in the past. We've certainly seen Evander Kane do it. He did it in Game 3, where these guys can kind of take over in the offensive zone once they get possession in there by just making, as you say, aggressive plays to the net, whether it's, cutting in when the defense doesn't expect you to, from an angle they don't expect you to, and then chucking the puck into the blue paint. As you say, Hyman had 2 or 3 quality chances created simply off of work ethic. And that's what the Oilers have to go back to, is those kind of fundamental pieces of it. But,
so
it's best of 3 now. So sorry.
So Elliot brought up was this not goal? How was this not goal interference in the third goal that went in? And I'm not usually, you usually hold me to task when it comes to penalties or it's not being the ref who impacted the game. But there was like Elliot said at the beginning, it's like those misconducts. If you're not going to call the cross check on Nurse, you're going to call the slash, and then 10 minutes and he's out.
Both. No, they called both.
I get it. But but this is my thing. It's like, he wouldn't have slashed this guy if you called. Sure.
They were calling it. They were calling it, Braden. That's the thing. Darnell Nurse retaliated in that situation and makes the call.
The game.
Yeah, they kicked both of them out of the game. Kick both of them again because they're trying to control the energy of the space that time. They've already lost the room. The reality is, Darnell Nurse, that was a hot-headed play, though, by Darnell Nurse. If Darnell Nurse hadn't turned around and slashed him, the Oilers would have had a power play. The Oilers would have had a power play at a position in the game where they could have actually done something with it, is what I'm saying. That's the emotional part coming out. I made an observation partway through this game where I said, what's interesting about this? The Oilers have clearly figured out some of the demons that faced them in Chicago and Winnipeg. They've clearly figured out how to win in the playoffs. That's good. But the one thing that this core of Oilers hasn't yet done? Led a series. They don't know how to close out a series as this core. This isn't the same group from 16 or whatever it was. This is a different group of guys that has suffered 2 really difficult playoff losses. That was weighing on them. They get the two wins. They get the lead in the series. They're feeling good about it, but they come into this game in a position to put sort of the stranglehold on, and they have never been in this position yet. And I think they were a little bit surprised at the top with how well LA came out. The big difference for me in this game too is the physicality just fell off the charts. LA and Edmonton combined for 75 hits in Game 3, which is the most hits of any game or any team, any game in any series so far this playoffs. And the league average throughout the season was 22 hits combined. So when you think about how physical Game 3 was, I don't know what the number of hits were in Game 4, but I'm telling you, it was completely mitigated. And then at the end, sure, it gets chippy, but that's just emotion. That isn't physicality. The Oilers need to take the physicality back and control that part of the game, because it forced LA to make bad passes. It forced LA into situations they didn't feel comfortable in. And sure, Edmonton isn't the biggest team in the world, but every single guy on that team was throwing hits and finishing checks in Game 3, and it really did make a difference. Do you know what I mean? Let's really quickly we'll do a little straw poll here. So of the 3 of us, I'm going to say it's yes or no. Should that have been a legal goal, Elliot? Yes or no? We can discuss the merits of the call after, but for you, was it a goal? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Braden, goal? Yes or no?
Again, as it relates to how the referee should have called.
I don't care about the referee. Was it a goal? Yes or no? To your eyes, would you have called it a goal? Do you believe it was a goal, a legal goal?
No, I do not believe it was a legal goal.
Okay, no. I'm going to
go with puck go in.
I go with Elliot and say I think it should have been a goal. Had it been an Edmonton Oilers player on the other side of it, I would have wanted that to be a goal. The reality is they're fighting for the puck. I would have
wanted it to be a goal.
Well, I'm saying I think it's a goal, and I would have wanted it to be called a goal either way, is what I'm saying. I'm not my emotional connection to the result of it is not impacted.
Goaltender. If somebody
let me tell you what
in,
but let me tell you. So let's walk through it. Throughout this season, let's break it into 2 pieces. With the goaltending interference, we'll come to second because they dealt with it second. The first part is was it a legal goal in terms of how the goal itself was scored, right? He did not put the puck in with his hand. He put the puck in with his stick. Did he push the puck over the goal line? He put the puck in with his stick.
I watched the replay. Any conclusive evidence of that.
Go watch it again. They've got an overhead shot online.
I think that's where I would say, the question was. I think on the ice it was called a goal. And so then it should have stayed a goal. I think if it was on the ice, it was called no goal. It should have stayed no goal because I didn't see anything conclusive that demonstrated one way.
And the other part of that for me is, okay, so he pushes it in. It's not about the him pushing the puck over the line. It's him pushing Mike Smith's pad out of the way.
So let's get to that second.
Goal.
So that's goaltender interference is where that falls under, right? That would be
correct,
goaltender
and that's
interference.
how I would have called it as the referee saw it.
And here's the
ice.
result. But then even when you then go to a replay, because it could have been challenged either way, whether you called it on the ice as goalie interference, or in this case, Jay Woodcroft takes the risk of challenging the play. When you look at that play all season long, very consistently, players who are pushed into the goaltender by a defensive player, they do not call that goaltender interference. You have to
describe it as pushed.
He was tripped, and it would have been a call. The referee's hand was in the air, so it was already a called penalty coming up. The contact from Darnell Nurse clearly led the momentum forward, and he made contact with the goaltender. It doesn't matter whether your arms moved or your head moved or what part of your body physically made contact. If you are in a shoving match with a defenseman and the contact from that defenseman leads you into the goaltender, they have called that not goaltender interference all season long.
Yeah, that's where I meant.
That's where it is.
Darnell Nurse trips him with his feet.
100%. Watch the replay. Closes his ankles and trips him. It's a penalty. If it isn't a goal, it's a penalty, and it's certainly not goaltender interference.
But I think the question is more so around whether he pushed in with his glove or not, and I don't think it's conclusive one way or another.
And but then it doesn't matter if he tripped him in. He could push it with his head or his,
I think that's where I think that it definitely gets murky and messy when we start getting into like body parts pushing pucks into the nets. It's the same thing with kicking motion, and all those things are very subjective. And obviously the referee sees it at full speed from behind the net with bodies in front of him.
No, and he sees the guy push right the goalie. How is he not calling goalie interference first and foremost?
Because he's tripped.
I think if that's a similar play, but instead of his hands, it's his feet, you'd call that a kicking motion. I think it's a punching motion, but I don't think there was conclusive evidence enough.
Is it a kicking motion if he's falling down? So if he's literally sitting on his ass and his feet are in front of him and he pushes the puck in with his feet, how is that a kick?
Well, if it is a kick, but you see his arms go forward. Like I think
and I think you can make the argument he definitely was pushing his stick into the puck. Whether it made contact with his glove or a stick, his intention.
No, I know. I'm not. We're arguing over something really fine here. I think it's a punching motion, but I don't think you can tell if it was his hand or his stick, and it was called the goal on the ice. So
sure.
It's a goal.
And as I'll end it with this, the same way I ended the conversation that happened in my household following that goal. You're still trailing by 2 goals. Now it's just 3. You didn't score a single goal. You're not winning that hockey game. That goal isn't the deciding factor. That isn't overtime. It isn't the winning goal. In the end, it was not like inconsequential. It may as well have been an empty net goal, frankly, because at that point you're already down 2-0 and you haven't scored a goal. You didn't score a goal. You can't win a hockey game. It's that simple. So,
well, you can't hit the net. You can't score a goal. That's the other part of the game I had a problem with.
So look, we've got lots obviously that we were frustrated with as fans of it. Lots to be positive about so far in this series. If I had told you a week ago that you were going to be sitting here a week later with a chance to win a series in a best of 3, you'd have taken that opportunity compared to what we've already seen from the Oilers in previous seasons. This is a heck of a series. Now it's a real, and now it's just going to come down to who's able to rebound from this game, or in LA's case, can they carry this momentum forward? I'll give you a positive note. The Edmonton Oilers haven't lost back-to-back games under Jay Woodcroft. They in regulation. So there's positive there. They've bounced back well. We saw that in game 2. I would expect that they're going to be the more aggressive team in game 5, and if they can get that win, they have they have two opportunities to close it out. So that's, again, you take those odds. Let's leave it there for now. We're going to go to the rest of the NHL in a second. That was topic 1. Do you or someone you know own a small business? Are you looking to grow or to reach new customers? Hey, why not let us help? Hattrick is looking for unique brands, businesses, and products to advertise on our show. You can find out how we can help spread the word about your business by contacting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Okay, let's jump into topic 2. the idea here is to try our best not to dwell on the Oilers and the LA King series.
Just jump back into the Oilers.
Exactly. But there is a lot of good stuff going on in the NHL. If you're watching it, even if you're only watching it casually, whether you're watching full games or whatever, deuces are wild tonight. Literally, we've got 4 games, I think, that ended that tied up series. So Carolina and Boston is tied 2-2. Minnesota, St. Louis is tied 2-2. Toronto and Tampa is tied 2-2. And obviously Edmonton, LA. Fantastic hockey in a lot of these series, as Braden kind of joked about a second ago, up until game 3, basically first guy to score won in the Dallas Calgary series. Maybe we should start there. Impressions so far of the fight in the dog when it comes to Dallas. Obviously, to take Calgary to a 1-0 win in game 1, fighting them tooth and nail, and then being able to pull out game 2 and 3 for that matter. Fantastic results from, if you're a Dallas fan and if you're not a Calgary fan. What for you, Elliot, would you say about this series so far? Anything stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first 2 games was pretty surprising at how Calgary's inability to score. I mean, they didn't score a goal 5-on-5 until game 3.
They've scored 3 goals this whole series.
And they've scored 3 goals this whole series. And so I think that speaks to, and they were a good 5-on-5 team this year. That's what set them apart in the division. Yeah. So I think that's the most surprising thing for me. I mean, this is the only way that Dallas is going to win this series, I think. And hilariously, Dallas is kind of beating them at their own game right now. Like, I'm sure Sutter is loving this hockey. No one else is. It's a snores fest. This is the series I've watched the least of. And thank God, it's awful.
Well, why would you? Yeah.
Well, but I mean, give Jake Ottinger full credit as a goaltender. He has just been absolutely phenomenal for Dallas. We joked, or maybe it was just me. I joked at one point that there has been a bit of a curse recently for being that number 1 seed, and those pesky wild card teams that come up and kind of get you. Edmonton certainly experiencing that last year with Winnipeg. And I said, Calgary's got to be careful here, because there's something that happens when you fly too close to the sun. You have a great season. Everything's going well for you. You're expecting everything to go well for you in the playoffs. And then you kind of get hit in the face with just the difference of how playoff hockey is played. And in Dallas's case, remember, this is a team that 2 years ago, the large part of this core went to the finals in the bubble. I mean, there's a lot of playoff experience on the Dallas Stars, a lot of guys who have a lot to prove still. They're well coached. They're clearly playing a good system against Calgary. And as it may not be exciting hockey, but it is certainly it's certainly dramatic and interesting to look at from the outside when you think about the fact that Calgary, everyone had their expectations on Calgary, obviously.
Pavelski's got 3 goals as well. So Pavelski's got 3, and Calgary as a team has 3.
No, it really does feel like every game starts in overtime. It's sort of like first guy to score really is more, they win the game. So another series that we were really excited about, Elliot especially, was Minnesota, St. Louis. You both kind of scoffed at me when it came to my suggestion that St. Louis was able to match them goaltending. Was they certainly didn't game 1. They posted a shutout there, 4-0 there, but then Minnesota bouncing right back, putting 6 in, and then 5 in. And now tonight, St. Louis puts 5 in. So this is one of those, this is like the opposite of the Calgary series, where we're just seeing these huge scoring games, as I think one of you sort of mentioned in the prelim. I mean, this is a huge trend right now across the board, or big high scoring affairs. NHL must love it, because they've done everything they possibly can to try to get scoring up in the NHL. But what are your impressions so far of this series, Elliot? Do you think Minnesota is struggling a little bit to figure out which goaltender they really need in net night to night here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the question. I mean, I think the St. Louis Blues are also facing that question as well too. Yeah. Bennington's win tonight was his first win since the playoffs, the
finals,
Stanley Cup. Yeah.
So
this is a bit of they're both a little bit on shaky ground on that front. I mean, this is a real back and forth series. I really like Minnesota, but and I really like Kaprizov. He's got 5 goals already in this series, and so my money's still on Minnesota, but this is tight, man, and one of the more interesting series for sure.
Well, and much like the Oilers in LA, it's the 2 and the 3 playing each other, and clearly they are very close against each other. Let's jump to the other side, Braden. Does the intensity and sort of now like literal sort of aggression of the Carolina Boston series surprise you at all when you think about who those 2 combatants are?
Absolutely. I think Carolina is a really fierce team. Boston has a bit, quite a bit of their core, namely Brad Marchand. He came out on fire today with five points. I think this game, I certainly was surprised to see Boston as competitive as I thought they would, I thought they were going to get swept, I think, against Carolina. So to see them tied at 2 right now is a bit of a surprise, but I'm impressed. I'm impressed. I mean, I think now having it be at 2-2, this is sure to go 7. I don't, much like what you guys said with Minnesota, St. Louis, you're starting to see just how much the battle back and forth, and who knows, maybe we do see this with the Oilers and the Kings. But these series are going to go deep, I think.
Obviously, a lot of emotion boiling over in that game. I don't know if you caught the whole Brad Marchand.
Todd Marchand
is a deep cut. Brad Marchand and Tony DeAngelo exchange there. Brad Marchand shouting at him, "You're a fucking racist. You're a racist." And then the best part of that exchange being when the referee told him to stop, he turned to the referee and goes, "But he is," which was just classic Brad Marchand, and then obviously Tony DeAngelo continuing to be the pest that he is. So this is a series that I think the temperature is slowly rising, and now that we're into a best of 3 again in this one, it'll be really fascinating to see how the coaches manage it, how the referees manage it, and where this series can go, because it could get out of hand here real quick. Let's jump to another interesting one. I don't know if we would call it as dramatic as that, but it's certainly interesting. I think Elliot suggested we may have even eulogized Pittsburgh, frankly, in our playoff preview. We kind of talked about the fact that they were ready for a rebuild, but Pittsburgh finds themselves up 2-1 against the Rangers. They're not ready for a rebuild yet. The big question is New York just another one of these teams that is lacking a little bit of the playoff experience that maybe would have, as the favorites going into that series, would have really put them over the top? And are they still sort of figuring it out? I mean, obviously game 1 goes to 3 overtimes before Pittsburgh wins it. New York bouncing back with a 5-2 win. And then Saturday night, Pittsburgh winning 7-4. Game 4 goes Monday, but this is another, just one of those series that the goals are going in left and right on both teams. Thoughts on New York, Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I think that's a bit revisionist. I'm pretty sure I picked Pittsburgh to win this series, though I said it would be tough. And I said I didn't want to bet against Malkin and Crosby, and this is exactly why. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, there's a team here with tons of playoff experience, but maybe the second best team in overall. If you took their NHL 2022 ratings as teams, the New York Rangers are probably better. They certainly are in the standings, but they are playing a very experienced team with some champions on it. And I think you're seeing that. I mean, this series is close, though. 7-4 last night aside. I mean, the New York Rangers take game 1 if their last-minute goal isn't called back for goaltender interference on what is also, I think, a 50-50 play when you go back and look at it as well, too. So,
what do you mean? Also, you guys determined that it wasn't 50-50.
I said it was 50. I said it was 50-50.
Not goalie interference.
This series has been really interesting. And what's great is because, if there's one American series that you're going to see in Canada, it's the one that Sidney Crosby's in. So we've gotten to see a lot of these games, and I've really enjoyed it. I really think the New York Rangers are going to be a sweet team to come. And this might be the learning experience. Losing to Pittsburgh like this might be the learning experience that they need to have.
Well, certainly not over. It's only 2-1, but we'll see what happens with that one. Speaking of another 2-1, I got to talk
about this. All right. The fact that Pittsburgh has now lost Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith and are playing Louis Domingue as their starting goal. Like, the only thing worse than losing in triple overtime is losing both of your goalies. And I know Jarry was out before, and we're seeing in another series, like Carolina's lost Freddie Anderson. I don't know how long he's going to be out. Darcy Kemper took a stick to the eye. Like, when it comes to goalies, the impact they have in the playoffs, it's going to be a problem. I really don't think Pittsburgh's going to be able to hold on with Louis Domingue in the playoffs here, unless they have this freak Michael Leighton out of Philly experience. But I just don't think that's going to happen.
Fair enough. Jumping to another 2-1 series, as I say, and also another top-ranked team facing some early adversity. Washington is up 2-1 on Florida. Surprise anything, Elliot?
Oh yeah, very surprised. I didn't think that Washington had a chance in this series. I think Florida. I thought if Florida was the team I picked to win the Stanley Cup in my head when we started and thinking about it. And I think that you've got to be shocked and in pretty convincing fashion. Washington's won those games as well too. I think
4-2 and 6-1. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're headed towards a pretty long series here. And I mean, if Florida was a first round exit, you got to think about guys like Giroux and I think Thornton's on that team too, right?
Yep.
Thornton must just think he's cursed if they go out in the first round. like that.
He
To
might
me,
be.
I felt very strongly that Florida was the pick at the East, at least to make it to the Eastern Finals, to be down 2-1 to Washington in the first round. And, game 4 in Washington, I don't know. Seems pretty nervous.
You mentioned Braden Darcy Kemper, obviously a question mark for game 4 after taking that stick through the mask to the eye, but Colorado is doing exactly what I think everyone expected. Give Nashville some credit. They did take game 2 to overtime, but really Colorado is what we expected them to be, aren't they, Braden?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm so high on Cale Makar. This guy, like it reminds me of prime Brent Burns, Eric Carlson, Chris Letang, but like better. This guy, you've got a forward playing excellent D. This guy will win the Norris, I believe, this year. It's crazy what I mean, and then I'm not even mentioning the speed of McKinnon and Landeskog and Rantanen and Kadri's come on. Like this team is, they're doing exactly what everybody anticipated coming or expected from them in the playoffs in this first round, and they're just gonna. I really believe they're just gonna continue to do it.
Let's round it out with the other series that I would argue has the same level of expectation the Oilers have on them, if not higher, in the Toronto Maple Leafs, and a series that kind of right now is mirroring it. We've got literally back-to-back winners for each of these teams. So obviously Toronto jumped out to a great lead in the series with their huge 5-0 win, but then they fall, letting in 5 of their own in game 2, 5-3. And then literally, if you score 5 goals or more, you're winning here. Which you should expect, I suppose. This is, 5 goals is a lot, but basically what I should say is if you score more than 3, you're going to win, because that's what all it is. The game 3, Toronto scores 5, they win 5-2. And then obviously Sunday night, Tampa Bay bounces back with a 7-3 win. So that is
it also means if you put in 5
series.
goals, you're going to let in 5 goals the next game.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's what's fascinating about it, is that both the Oilers series and the Leaf series, they, as I say, they kind of mirror each other in the rhythm of how this is playing out. We expected that this would be a tight series. Obviously, we talked about, Toronto kind of drawing the short stick here when it came to opponents in the first round. But when you think about it, obviously very evenly matched. They've come this far even. Elliot, when you look at this, who do you give the edge to here moving into game 5 and then through the rest of the series, or is it still too close to even do that?
There's not been a game in this series that's been close, so it's really hard to kind of tell what's going on. I think in the games they've lost, Toronto's not played up to their potential. And I think on the whole, Toronto's a better team. But just like when we were talking about Pittsburgh, you cannot deny the value of having players who have been there before and won the championship before. And not only is Tampa Bay chock full of those guys, they're chock full of guys that have done it twice, back to back, in very different scenarios and in situations. And they've playing in front of one of the best, if not the best goalie in the league. I feel like I'm sort of rehashing what we said last week, namely Braden, but it's come to fruition. I mean, I think you maybe give a slight edge to Toronto because they've got home ice advantage for these next 3 games. They have to win at home, and if they do that, they're fine. Versus Tampa Bay, that's going to need to take one on the road. But they've shown they can do that. So I mean, it's close, but I think maybe slight edge Toronto, and I think I picked Toronto to come out of this series. So I'll stick with my guns.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the exciting part about it. We'll come down to the next couple of days, and we'll see where we get to. As I say, most of these series look like they're going to go longer. I mean, Colorado, I think, is pretty much done and dusted, whether Nashville pulls one out or not. I mean, you're not coming back 3-0 against that top team unless we'd have an epic collapse. But most of these series look like they're going to go at least 6 or 7, which is exciting. It's good for the sport. It's good for the league. I would argue, and I don't agree with Gary Bettman on almost anything, but he did have a short media avail in Edmonton, I believe, before game 2. And one of the things he talked about was, some people were asking about playoff format and maybe they should add more teams, and the fact that they have the same number of teams now in the league that they did when they had 26 teams in the league prior to some earlier expansion on all of these things. And does the NHL playoff need a retooling? I think a lot of that coming from, the play-in games in the NBA and people looking at other leagues and what they're doing. And Gary Bettman sort of said, no, I don't think we need to follow the lead of other leagues, because I think that if you look at our playoff format and specifically our round 1, it is by far the most competitive and exciting round 1 of any major sport in North America. And I think this is proving that in spades. I would agree. I think whether we want to get into the semantics of the Stanley Cup is the hardest trophy to win or not, I would argue that the first round of the NHL playoffs, the competition level, the aggression level, the stakes are high in every single series, even in what looks like a rout 3-0 up for Colorado. Game 2 was an overtime game. That's exciting hockey. The stakes are there for every fan base. Everybody can invest in it, and we wait and see what happens. But I think Gary Bettman, at least on that one note, is right. The NHL playoffs has not disappointed in round 1. Any last thoughts on round 1 so far, Braden?
It's gonna be great to see how far some of these series go, because I truly think we're gonna see a lot of game 7s in this first round.
Elliot?
The other thing I would say is all the best series right now are the 2 versus 3 seeds. Toronto, Tampa Bay, Edmonton, LA, Pittsburgh, New York. I forget what the 4th one was. But
Carolina?
No, St. Louis, Minnesota.
St. Louis,
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the best series. Those are the closest.
Sure.
We should have come to. We don't. That's usually the 4 versus 5 series is always very close in the previous format. So none of us should be surprised. But having 4 of those versus 2 in the previous makeup, I think is really the league hitting on all cylinders in terms of excitement. And I'm just happy to, next week we'll see. Go Oilers.
All right. We'll leave it there. That's topic 2.
Do you like fast cars? Do you like when they race? Whether you're a seasoned Formula One fan or you've just discovered the rush of racing, check out the Pit Stop Podcast presented by the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Join Jordan, Tyler, and Braden each week as they recap every race as well as break down the biggest stories on and off the track, all before setting you up for the next race in the Formula One schedule. The Pit Stop Podcast is available anywhere you get your podcasts.
All right. Well, topic 3 is a bit of a grab bag. We haven't done this really before, but basically we're turning this over and kind of giving each of us an opportunity to throw some story out there from around the sports world in the last week that we wanted to just sort of get the other guys' opinions on and thoughts like that. So obviously lots going on. There's baseball being played, and we know Elliot and his beloved Padres are into it. Braden and his beloved Blue Jays are into it. The NBA playoffs tick along. We haven't given them much love, but they are what they are. And lots of other unique sporting events that come up and sort of arrive at this time of year. We obviously talked Masters a couple weeks ago. Let me lead this segment off. I don't know if either of you watched or cared or caught any of the Kentucky Derby. It's obviously the most exciting, 2 minutes in sport. It's a lot of build up for what is a very short race. I believe this race on Saturday was the shortest Kentucky Derby in history, as in the fastest, which also I think played to the result. Rich Stake, who was a 80-1 upset winner on the Kentucky Derby. He is the second longest odds to ever win the Kentucky Derby. The longest odds, I believe, coming in 1913. So that's a hell of a long streak for a horse with that sort of high a betting line, including 99-1 a day earlier. So Rich Stakes, give full credit to the horse, give jockey Sonny Leon full credit for pulling what was a miracle race out. Give the Kentucky Derby credit for finally having a race after 2 very controversial years. 2 years ago, we had the winner disqualified because of a violation on track. Last year, we had the winner disqualified because of illegal steroids that were rubbed on a skin condition. Bob Baffert, famed trainer, obviously being suspended as a result. Lots of drama in what is already a very dramatic sport. But I don't know if either you caught it or cared or thought about it. But for me, that was a really fun and exciting. It comes once a year. It's a Kentucky Derby. I mean, what else are you going to say? It's a bunch of ponies running in a circle, but it's exciting.
But it's exciting. It's great to see animals racing. Competition in any avenue is exciting.
And when you have a horse that is, again, no one expected to be there, but also like the way he came back.
It's a great story.
He was in the middle of the pack. I don't know if you saw the photos of it. Both the horse's face and the jockey looked like they had been mud wrestling because they had been in the pack behind all these other horses the whole way. I'm surprised either of them could even see that they had won by the time they got through the field. But a lot of the favorites, including the horse named Messier, fell off near the end because of the pace. These horses had never run this fast. They were not expected the race to go at this speed. So a lot of these horses are just not, they're fast, but it's like taking 100-yard sprinter and asking him to run 1,500 meters at top speed. Eventually he's going to run out of steam. And so obviously this horse condition wise, and that was great to see, it pulled it through.
I want to know about this Messier horse.
Yeah, there was a horse named Messier owned by some Canadian, Japanese investors. Hockey fans clearly named their horse Messier.
Yeah, it's the daughter of a former Oiler that was on like the 80s team stuff. She's a part owner in it too. Jordan, This is going to follow the same like trajectory that it goes every year, where there's going to be some interest in this until the next race in the Triple Crown. Inevitably, the horse is not going to win the next race in the Triple Crown, and then we're going to forget about it until next year, right?
Probably. Obviously, American Pharoah won the Triple Crown a few years ago, first time in a very long time. It's probably this horse is, if this horse wins the Triple Crown, this will be the greatest story in sports history, period. End of conversation. It will be every movie, every TV series that's on the books right now, sportswear, they tear him up, burn him down. This will be the story, because if this horse wins another race, it will be impressive, right? I don't think this horse had won a race, period. He's a 3-year-old horse. I don't think he's won anything. He's shown maybe a couple times. He's clearly fast. No one except anyone who tells you they expected, including the trainer, tells you they expected him to win is full of shit. Here, however, there is one Canadian connection I think you should know. This horse's mare, so his mother, was bred in Manitoba. So he has Canadian lineage, which is kind of fun. Also an interesting story, and this is a sad story a little bit, but it's still, I don't know. There's always, when you get a horse that wins, there's always sort of like you dig into all of the other parts of it or whatever. There was a lot of sort of controversy about how this horse behaved after winning. So if horse racing, the horse wins, and then when the winner. No, but once the horse wins, they're gathered by what they call literally these like support horses, right? So non-horse racing horses ridden by stewards, if you call them, kind of like a racing term or whatever, similar. I don't know if they're actually called stewards, but if it was Formula One, it'd be called stewards. Anyway, they're like officials or whatever. They come over and they take control of the horse from the jockey to ensure that the horse goes wherever it needs to, for whether it's post-race testing, whether it's whatever, and in this case, to the winner's circle. So this other horse, who's just like a normal everyday workhorse, was basically like savaged by this winning horse because they're right up next to each other, and the racehorse literally started biting, and attacking this horse's neck. And for a very awkward time, the camera stayed on them, and they watched as this poor marshal in his like red hat and red coat had to start like hitting the racehorse in the face to get him to not attack the neck of the horse he was riding. And
do you know which horse it was? Because I got some of the names here. Epicenter,
Rich Strike.
Oh, it was that one. It wasn't Tis the Bomb or Happy Jack.
Epicenter was the horse that lost this
race. The horse that lost this race, his name was Summer is Tomorrow.
When you say lost this race, do you mean as in came in last?
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
there were 2 that didn't finish apparently, or maybe they didn't even get to start the race.
One didn't start. One
Ethereal Road and Rattle and Roll didn't post any times here.
One last story, and I just wanted to mention this part because again, there's sort of 3 facets of horse racing. There's the jockey that everybody knows. Obviously, they ride the horse and they make decisions in the race. There's the trainer who develops the plan to make sure this horse gets to where they need to get to potential-wise. And there's the owner. And obviously, the owner is the big wealthy guy who owns the horse and breeds the horse and pays for it. This horse was owned by Richard Dawson, hence the Rich Strike, part of his name. Red TR Racing. They've trained a lot of horses over the years. They've owned a lot of horses over the years. However, in 2018 in California, the wildfires burned part of their ranch down and killed 80 animals.
Oh, no.
And he left horse racing as a result because they were so devastated by the loss of all of these animals. And it was only after being pushed very strongly by the trainer of this specific horse that he should buy this horse and they should race this horse. This horse was bought a year and a half ago by Richard Dawson for less than $200,000. You want to take a guess what this horse is worth today?
Oh, millions.
Yeah. This horse, even if he never wins another race, they estimate he'll probably be just the breeding rights alone to this horse will be over $1 million. He's probably close now to about a 200, maybe $300 million horse. It's a pretty good investment, I would say.
That's wild.
Anyway, any other sports stories? I've kind of dominated this topic. The point was we were going to jump in with other things. What have you been watching? What are you interested in, Elliot?
Yeah, I continue my Padres fandom, as you mentioned off the top. They are like 17-10 this year. Not playing particularly amazing, but they're beating the teams that they're supposed to be beating. Every once in a while, they get spanked 8-0, and me, along with all the Padres faithful, start to say, "Oh, this is the end. This is the infrastructure crumbling apart. The team's going to fall apart," because they really can't hit, guys. It's kind of embarrassing, but they are a really good defensive team, and they continue to pitch well. They've got probably some of the best starting pitching in the league, and their bullpen's held out. Then you really can't complain. It's not a bad way to win baseball games. Maybe they're on their way to a 90-win season. The only concern I have is that they play in the best division in baseball, and they've played one series against San Francisco and one series against the Dodgers. And while they did get a win in both series, they lost both series. So putting them up against, their divisional rivals, they're still not quite at that level. But you've had big steps taken across the field. Ha-Seong Kim, who you guys remember, that was the jersey I wanted, having an outstanding year, playing consistently in third and shortstop. They're just playing good baseball, and they just need to be kind of this good until Tatis Jr. comes back, and then all bets are off. They could certainly be a playoff team this year.
They're sitting there 1.5 games back of the Dodgers. They're ahead of the Giants, so that there's got to be something.
When
there,
is
right?
Tatis supposed to be back?
They've played a lot easier competition, I would say. Like they swept the Reds and stuff. Like that being said, they're winning the games they need to win. When is Tatis back? They're being relatively tight-lipped about that. Some people think June. Some people think August. I mean, half the question is not when he comes back, but also what's he going to be when he comes back. It's a broken wrist we're talking about here. So I think if the team is good and they're continuing to sort of be in the playoff hunt, you will see them try and wait for as long as possible. But it's really going to be dependent on sort of how that recovery goes. And so far, every time he's had an injury, he's come back really quickly. So that sort of gives me a lot of hope. But it's anyone's guess at this point.
Elliot, do you watch all of these games? Do you record them and you watch all of these games? Or do you watch Padres in 30?
I haven't watched a single pitch of Padres baseball this year. I just follow all the fan sports podcasts, and I have it on the app, so I know every game that they play and what happens in every game.
So you're not even a Padres fan. You're a Padres podcast fan.
Yeah. Basically,
no, but
I know
isn't that half of baseball? Like they play 450 games a year.
I don't have to watch. I can watch. I can read the box score and I know exactly what.
That's what I mean. They play like 7,000 games. It doesn't matter if you watch every game or every inning or even if you watch any at all. No, I think that baseball is one of the great sports of being able to be a casual fan, because at the end of the day, none of this matters until October.
Yeah.
You know if your team's going to make it or not pretty much by the end of June, and then you wait and see what happens.
No, that's not true. There's some pretty tight wild card races.
No, yeah, it could be tight. Like, I mean, I think the Padres are going to be on. The Padres need
even with 7,000 games.
They need to stay healthy, and there's stuff that can happen in between now and there. Like, they're a middle of the pack team. I mean, the Dodgers are going to be in the playoffs, and they're going to be good, and they're likely going to win. The Yankees are going to likely be the team that comes out of the
easy.
Yeah, the New York, the
Yankees have been coming on hot, but the Jays have had some really tough series lately. So I wouldn't hold out.
This is all great. This is all great. But Elliot, what I was really hoping you were going to talk about was whether or not the Rocket won in snooker. Did he win the tournament?
Oh yeah, he did win. Yeah, he's now tied for the record for the most Masters championships, and he's just further solidified himself as the greatest
GOAT
of all time. Yeah, no, he's the GOAT. He's the Tom Brady of snooker. Sure.
How fast did he win that?
This is the championship. The final one is like, it's a best of 35. So they played over like 3 days. I think they do a morning and an afternoon and an evening session.
Nonstop. They're just
no,
24-hour.
They play sets of 5, I think, or sets of 7 per session. And then you go away and you have a break. That's the thing about pool. It's like anyone can get hot and win a couple games. But what makes snooker so incredible is that the best players are playing consistently great throughout the entire tournament over multiple days, over multiple sessions in one day. So you can play well in the morning, come back in the afternoon and not be as well, or your opponent is playing much better, and they can really flip the script on you. So,
the question: are you allowed to drink while playing snooker?
Yeah, because that's how I get hot at playing any pool.
I don't think they drink, no.
Okay, because apparently another very popular sport in the UK, as I assume snooker is darts. And there's been a lot of controversy this year because several of the professional dart players have been pushing back against new regulations. They've been limited now to 5 pints per match, and they say that that's not enough.
Not enough?
Yeah, they're arguing that they shouldn't be limited to just 5.
I think
it can't be considered a performance enhancing anything.
Yeah, they're not allowed to drink it on television, but they are still permitted to drink it during a match. But now they've been limited to 5 pints. And I'm just
what
curious.
I would say is, no, snooker and darts are very different and attract very different crowds. Snooker can get a little wild, but you'll see if you ever watch snooker, there's actually a strict enforcement of like utter
no drinking, silence.
And so it's like, if you yell,
you wouldn't do well, Brady.
Please.
Neither of us would.
They're playing in suits and bow ties and stuff. It's very different culture.
That's awesome though. Bowling would be an interesting one. Maybe that's one you can drink as well.
Yeah,
maybe. Braden, we'll leave it to you here. What's your contribution to our cornucopia of sports consumption this weekend?
We won't get too much into this race, but on the feet in the same track as controversy, what do you guys take? Have you heard anything about this jewelry ban that the FIA is bringing, or that F1's adopting? Maybe Jordan, you can enlighten Elliot a little bit about because you'll have better language to what this ban actually is and the protesting that's happening in F1.
Yeah, so basically this year with the 2 new race directors that were brought in after the whole Michael Massey thing, a few different rules that have basically been enhanced to try to improve safety and all these kind of things, but a few of them have certainly garnered some attention. Let's say one of them being that there's a new enforcement of sort of restricting drivers from wearing any type of jewelry in the vehicle. The argument being the only thing drivers should be wearing in the vehicle is safety approved. It has to be safety approved or whatever under the sort of racing code. So, you've got to be in flame retardant underlayers. You've got a flame retardant racing suit. You've got flame retardant gloves. You've got flame retardant boots. You've got a racing helmet, and these all have to be set to a specific code. And there's a very strict rules about it, and it makes sense. Look at Roman Grosjean literally climbing out of an inferno because clearly the safety precautions that F1 had put in place saved his life. Minor burns. I shouldn't say minor. They were pretty bad, but he would call them minor burns to his hands. He still has his hands. And when you compare the injuries he suffered to someone like Niki Lauda, who was back in the 70s in a fiery inferno and, walked out of that, in absolutely horrific shape, the sport's come a long way. So anyway, the point being, they have banned all forms of jewelry and piercings inside the vehicle. And there's been a lot of pushback about this because there's a suggestion that there's really only one driver who's heavily pierced and is known for wearing a fair amount of jewelry, and he happens to also be the only black driver in the field. And so there's a lot of pushback about whether or not this is a rule that is meant for everyone or a rule that is targeting a single person. And so this weekend in Miami, in a bit of an act of protest, Lewis Hamilton arrived at the drivers' press conferences wearing 4 watches, about 17 necklaces. He made sure every piercing he has in his body was the largest diamond piercing he physically had, and went in there with, I think, like 6 rings on every finger. He looked literally like one of two things. It was awesome. One, he was like a background performer in Pirates of the Caribbean, or 2, like he had literally just inherited a jewelry store's entire inventory.
He's like, I gotta wear them all. He's moving.
And the joke he made was, I need these 3 watches. One is English time, one is Miami time, and the other one is Hammer time. And he made, he very much tongue in cheek was making a point about the fact that this is a ridiculous rule. Should drivers be wearing a huge amount of chains and jewelry? Of course not. Is any driver really doing that? No. What other sport is banning a little crucifix on a gold chain? Nobody, right? Baseball players are allowed certain things. Then there's certain rules about it, but baseball it isn't a blanket rule.
Don't necessarily like combust into the flames. But
and I get that. The other part of it, though, that I think is interesting, because when you compare it to some of the other rules that have gone in, it makes sense. The one that's really funny and was attached to that, Braden, and I don't mean to jump on your point, but I don't know if you also saw this. But the other rule is that there's also been a crackdown on underwear, because there has been a lot of report that a lot of these drivers in the last couple years have not been wearing the flame retardant underwear because it's uncomfortable. So they've been wearing like boxer briefs or like regular Fruit of the Loom or whatever underwear under their racing suits, because obviously no one was really checking for it. And this year now they're being tested and checked, basically having to go into a private room and remove the top layer to ensure that everything they're wearing is safe. And again, another protest occurred with our other favorite Formula One driver, Sebastian Vettel, who arrived at his press conference with a pair of boxer briefs worn over his racing suit, which looked absolutely amazing. Be able to see that. And looked awesome. Like I encourage everyone to go Google this, because it really was wonderful. He showed up wearing a pair of sort of gray.
But it's only going to take one event where a car sets on fire, or the guy's wearing the wrong box briefs, and one roasty toasty wiener might turn things around there.
Regardless, it was certainly a funny story. So I do appreciate you bringing it up, Ray. That was pretty funny. Did you have a thought or 2 on it? Do you think that they should be cracking down on these things?
I think
is it overreach? I guess is the question. Underreach, if you will.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there is proper attire, equipment, I guess is a better way to. But in terms of a nose ring or a piercing is going to impede or contradict the rule around safety. I think it's a bit of an overreach for sure.
I mean, I think the argument about the piercings part is if the flame retardant gear you're wearing outside of that isn't protecting those elements of your body, I don't think the piercing is going to be the problem.
Yeah, well, it would,
right? By the time the fire gets to the nipple ring or the whatever,
nipple's already in danger.
That's what I'm saying. At that point,
the jewelry thing for sure, I think is an overreach. The undergarment part, I think that's just FIA encouraging safety and not wanting their drivers.
Fair. Here is, I think, part of the pushback, because Pierre Gasly also had a comment about this. He says, "What I don't understand is why I can't wear something comfortable underneath the flame retardant equipment as long as I'm wearing what I'm supposed to be wearing." So, for example, why can't he double up? He could wear, a nice pair of jockey shorts underneath that are comfortable. Maybe one of those ones that like separates the business so that you don't chafe. And then he could wear his flame retardant pants over that.
Maybe he's got a deal with Saks or something that he, it's actually a sponsorship issue.
Well, if he doesn't, Vettel certainly should have made that deal before he showed up. You know what he looked like? You know what it reminded me of?
Like Batman, like a kid.
When you went for Batman at Halloween and you just wore your underwear over your pants and you'd look like a superhero. That's what he looked like. Sebastian Vettel also, not to get too into the weeds, showed up to the press conference wearing a t-shirt that was a bit of a protest in and of itself. It was a photograph of a snorkel mask and mask with water up to the eyes, and underneath it said, "Welcome to the Miami Grand Prix 2060, the first Grand Prix underwater."
Ooh.
Which was clearly a statement about global warming and rising sea levels. And Sebastian Vettel has done a lot of messaging throughout the year. Obviously, he's wearing a support, end war, peace in Ukraine helmet this year. He's not been afraid to wear rainbow pride gear in some of the countries that they have raced in where they are very oppressive laws against such things. Both he and Lewis Hamilton made comments on the whole Roe v. Wade situation going on in the United States. So there was definitely a lot of, and I think these two drivers especially are the two that at this point have very little to lose and have a lot of personal investment in, the things they care about. Anyway, Elliot, have you ever had a job where someone regulated your undergarments?
I'm trying to think.
I love that he has to think about it. Like, maybe that was the case.
I've worked a lot of jobs.
Hold on, let me just think back to this. No, that's right.
I would say I was strongly encouraged to wear American Eagle underwear when I worked at
but there was no
that's a branding
checks, right? There was no spot checks in the back.
Let me see the waist.
We can't talk about what happened in the back room of American Eagle.
Oh yeah. Well, careful. God. We don't want to go into that.
God. Well, when I was a mascot, I for sure did not wear any undergarments, and that similar to Pierre Gasly.
Hold on. Are you telling me that when you were inside that giant blue cat suit for the Edmonton Cracker Cats, you were naked?
It's so fucking hot.
Braden, I was one of the other people who had to wear that thing.
I thought that's just what everybody was doing. There was a list of there was a sheet of the equipment and the undergarment not on it.
Wow.
Well, that explains the crabs outbreak amongst mascot bees in the early 20s.
Serious problem. Very serious problem.
All right. Area. Well, the team's back. There's a brand new team in Edmonton, the Edmonton Riverhawks. Go check them out. The West Coast League is back and ready to go for.
Randy Gregg's been really invested in that, I think.
Oh, is that who's taking it on? There. Look at the color scheme. See if you would, as a Padres fan, would be interested in any of their merchandise. Because myself, not at all. It looks terrible. It's like nobody really decided to design it.
Do they sell undergarments though?
Oh, likely not. No.
It might be time for some undergarments on our website store. I'm just thinking that too.
Yeah, Tanty polling.
Well, let's leave it there for now. This has been a great episode. Shout out to all of those out there who are wearing safety undies. Braden, thank you. Elliot, thank you. Thanks to everybody for listening. We do appreciate it as always. If you haven't yet, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. Leave us a comment, leave us a note on Instagram or Twitter, and pass this podcast on to your friends. Maybe they're interested in learning more about the things we're talking about, safety garments and jewelry, and maybe we'll get into a more thorough. You know what, Elliot? I was just thinking before I wrap this up, we don't have a snooker podcast on the network. I'll just leave that there. Yeah. Call it balls in the pocket. All right. That's our show for this week. That's Hat-Trick.
Balls in the pocket.
Hat-Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.